I'm getting ready to start screaming. Hello and welcome to the Granny Handicap live stream. I'm Janice Cole, your hostess for the evening, and let's get started. I thought I would talk about COVID-19 and disability tonight because COVID is very much on my mind, living in the South and knowing that just about every hospital in my state is in a state of emergency. If I were to have a heart attack or something, I doubt I could get into the emergency room in our area. I do go to Tennessee hospitals, so that would be Chattanooga. They're not quite as bad as Georgia is, but I imagine it will get that bad pretty soon. I can't understand why the simple act of wearing a mask is so difficult for so many people. I was getting my allergy shots today, and a teacher was in there saying that all these teachers are out and in quarantine, even though some of them have tested negative for COVID, because, of course, if you have COVID symptoms, you have to quarantine. And all of these people not wanting their children to wear masks is, of course, schools are little infection places. They are, there's a cold, it's going to spread like wildfire. So if there's COVID, it's also going to spread like wildfire. I saw a statistic the other night on the news that this Delta variant is so contagious that one person not wearing a mask, who might not even know that they are infected, can spread the virus to 30,000 individuals. This just blows my mind. This is, it's not quite as contagious as chickenpox, but almost. So all of these people are saying, yeah, I have the right to infect 30,000 people and I don't care. But some of those 30,000 people are going to die. It's callous. You know, these people claim to be Christians and they're not caring about their fellow man. I can't wrap my head around that. I absolutely can't. All the hate that these people are spouting over masks. I have asthma and I wear a mask, and I can stand it while I'm in a doctor's office or in a store. I wore my mask today in the allergist office and I did not suffer. I was a bit short of breath, but I'm always short of breath when I have to get up and do things. But it wasn't that much worse than not wearing a mask. You know, it's something that I do even though I'm fully vaccinated because the CDC is saying, well, you can still spread it even though you're vaccinated. But it has kept me out of the hospital. So, you know, I'm grateful that I'm vaccinated and I have had no long-term effects from the vaccination. I have had long-term effects from having COVID in December, and I'm still getting back on my feet and having a tough time of it. So I can't understand why anybody would risk getting this virus when it is so hard to get over. So, I'm just sitting here shaking my head. I'm a 62-year-old woman, and I've seen a lot of things in my life, but this situation, this COVID infection, takes the cake. Nothing in my all this wealth of experience that I've had in my life has prepared me for COVID. Nothing has prepared me for COVID. I thought the Hong Kong flu was bad in '68. I thought the type A flu was bad in 2016 or 2015, and mercy. Uh, I know people are tired of quarantines and masks and all of this, but I look at it a little differently. When I was trying to work, I got disabled at 40, and I was really struggling to keep jobs and to do the attendance thing. I was allowed to be out 2 days a month, and I couldn't stay within that, and that is why I ultimately had to quit work, and I was just disabled because every time I went to work, I caught cold after flu, after virus, and I was just devastated from that. I have fibromyalgia. And one thing that fibromyalgia does is you catch everything. It's not necessarily an immune system compromise, but it definitely weakens your immune system. And I have type B blood, which now that they've done studies during COVID, they've found out that people with A and B blood do catch more viruses than the normal population. We get sick more often than people with O or AB. So it stands to reason that anytime I was going to work, I was carrying home all the bugs that people were just charging on into work. And, I've got to work, I've got to feed my family. I didn't blame them, but they were giving it to me, and I was out for a week. They kept working during it, but I was not able to. And that is a difference, that there are kids in schools that have the same problem, and it is discriminatory against them not to wear a mask because they're going to catch it, whatever it is, COVID or a cold or the flu or whatever virus. Um, just a virus can cause a miscarriage. My OBGYN told me when I lost a baby and I was asking why. Why did I lose my baby that I wanted, that I didn't want to lose? And it could have been just one of those many viruses that I had while I was pregnant. So, if just everyday viruses can be that deadly to a fetus, then why are we so hesitant to protect our children? Because what gives one person a cold might give another one pneumonia, depending on their immune system and various factors. We don't know enough about infectious disease, period. And we are trying to learn very quickly in this time of COVID because COVID is brand new. Even though we have figured out its genetic code, we have come up with a vaccine that works. We've got 3 vaccines that work. So people have a choice of what vaccine they want to get. They didn't have those choices when I got my vaccine back in April. I had to take whatever was offered. I got the Pfizer, and my daughter got Moderna. They work equally well. We have had, we had very little effect at the time. And once we got over that immune response, which showed that the shot worked, we have not had any long-term effects from the vaccine. The vaccine works. I just wish more people would quit being afraid of it and just take it. just take the shot. It doesn't hurt that much when you get it. You may get a little sick, you may miss a couple of days from work, but it is worth it for the protection. And people are getting disabled from COVID. It's called long COVID. So let's get into it. I'm looking in my chat. I see Academy Impossible. Hello. And Celia. Hello to both of you. Glad you're with me tonight. And I'm going to put a link in here, and this is the article that I'm going to talk about. Um, so long haulers are people who have had COVID and they have ongoing symptoms that are so bad they can't work. So here's what people should know about going to Social Security and claiming disability benefits. And let me tell you, that is an adversarial process. It took me 4 years and a lawyer to get disability, even though I was unable to work and I really needed that money to take care of my child. So it was not an easy choice, but when I found that I was missing more time from work than I was there, I finally gave up on trying to find, you know, if you can't do the attendance, you can't do the job. The way personnel departments make their policies. If my job would have let me be absent and just not paid me for the time that I wasn't at work, I would have kept working for years. So these rigid attendance policies that we have in our schools, in our workplaces, are really hard on people who have not got the immune systems that most people have. So I'm saying that maybe OSHA should rewrite their guidelines so that you are judged on your work quality, not on your attendance. And those very attendance policies are very discriminatory against people with addiction problems. Why aren't we treating people with addiction problems instead of complaining that they just don't have whatever it is in them to be able to quit the drug? It's a physical problem. It is a medical problem. It is not something that's just a matter of willpower. I was watching something about fat. I am technically obese. I admit it. I weigh 230 pounds. I have tried so hard to lose weight. I have starved myself. I used to do a lot of fad dieting when I was in my teenage years, and in my 20s I finally said that, yo-yoing back and forth between a high weight and a low one was not healthy for me. So I quit the fad diets and I just tried to cut out certain things like butter out of my diet to try to keep myself from gaining too much weight. Well, I was watching a Nova on why people get obese, and fat, it acts like an organ in the way that it regulates your body's metabolism, so that it is actually not a question of willpower. It is a question of your body lowers your metabolism when you are hungry all the time so that you will eat more. It's a defense mechanism that our bodies evolved to have, but it works against us. So now science is trying to find a solution to that so that people like me can lose weight. It is very difficult, and the weight tends to creep up as you're older, and before you know it, I got up to 260 at one point, and I'm scared of getting there again. But it's not just a matter of having willpower and just not eating as much. you get hungrier, and it's horrible. So I guess I'm addicted to food, so I can kind of transfer that over and understand how an addict must feel. Maybe a decision they made as a teenager when emotion is high and peer pressure is a real thing. We should not be punishing people for the rest of their lives for their addictions. We should be treating them. So I'm hopeful that medical science will come up with a solution to obesity in my lifetime. And I would really like to not be as heavy. But I think that we will also come up with solutions for people who are addicted, that they can find some treatment that works better than what we have now. But what we have now works if people can afford the treatment. There needs to be more of a variety of treatment, and there needs to be a lot more research on addiction. So, but that ties into the attendance policies are so strict because they want to really aim those penalties at addicts and families of addicts. I was looked at as an addict because of my absences, but it wasn't because of that. It was because I was getting sick and I really could not come in and work all day. So we need to be kinder to people who are struggling. And getting Social Security disability is not a guaranteed thing. And once you've got it, like I have, you are constantly afraid of losing it. There have been many cases that a doctor has recommended to a disabled person, oh, you should take up gardening, or you should try to find some physical activity your body can tolerate. In doing that, a neighbor might see us out in the garden and think, oh, you're not disabled. I'm going to report you to Social Security. And people have lost their homes because of this. It's crazy that we live in such a society. We are told all our lives that this Social Security disability insurance is taken out on you in case you are ever disabled. But then if you apply for it, you are in for the process. Let's take a look at that process and see what it is like for people. First off, long-term COVID-19 symptoms can make it harder to get through the day, let alone return to work. As the pandemic progresses, more patients are expected to apply for Social Security disability payments. Getting approval for those monthly checks was challenging even before COVID. Here's what long-term COVID sufferers should know about the application process. And here's one of them, bless her heart. Persistent fatigue, shortness of breath, migraine headaches. I've had the persistent fatigue and shortness of breath, and of course I have asthma, but you know, uh, my daughter has had the migraines a lot worse since she had COVID. These are a few of the symptoms that long haul COVID 19 sufferers face. For some, it can make it impossible to work, prompting them to ask, am I eligible for Social Security disability benefits? We certainly have seen an increase of claims because of COVID related issues, including long haulers, said TJ Geist, principal advocate at Allsup, a company which represents Social Security disability claimants. Some claimants have been awarded Social Security disability benefits based on COVID-19 related symptoms, Geist said, but the majority of those have been people with lingering complications from being put on ventilators. However, not many of those patients have been classified as COVID-19 long haulers. The reason: Social Security disability is designed for people who suffer mental or physical conditions that have lasted or expected to last at least 12 months. Many of those who have long haul symptoms haven't met the duration requirement quite yet, Geis said. In fact, President Joe Biden recently moved to make long haul COVID-19 symptoms recognized as a disability under federal law. Though there is a lag in disability awards for COVID-19 long haulers, Geis said that he expects that to pick up as time goes on. Still, whether disability requests are successful depends on how well claimants follow the rules. Apply as early as possible. The first thing to realize about applying for Social Security disability benefits is that it is often a lengthy process, Geist said. Once an initial application is filed with the Social Security Administration, it can take 3 to 5 months to get a decision. If that initial application is denied, it can take 4 to 6 months for the application to be reconsidered on a first appeal, Geist said. In other words, you apply for Social Security and about, you know, um, a large majority of them are turned down. Then you ask for a reconsideration. So they have a different doctor read through your very big file, and you have to have had a lot of doctor's appointments because they look through your medical records. So you have to get medical records from everywhere you've ever seen a doctor. And it's harder now because they're not required to keep those records past 7 years. So if it's been longer than 7 years since you were at the doctor, then you might not have any medical records. So this is why it is a good idea every time you go in to see the doctor, get a copy and keep it. Scan it, put it on a hard drive, or just keep the paper copies, because it is expensive to get those medical records. If you are asking for your entire file, you might be looking at, maybe $100 or so. It's expensive. So, and if you transfer your records from one doctor to another, all you're going to get are the records you see at your current doctor. You are not going to get those past records. They are not allowed to release them to you because they are not your property. They are not the doctor's property you're seeing now. They belong to that medical office that they came from. It's crazy. So if you don't keep copies, you may not be able to get your entire medical history. So this is why it's so important to hang on to your records. If you think that you might be disabled, you need to start gathering these medical records and hang on to them. That's not in the article. This is just me telling you from my experience with Social Security and trying to get medical records. So going on, it can take 4 to 6 extra months for the application to be reconsidered. From there, if the application has to be reviewed at a hearing, it can take up to 12 months just to get scheduled before a judge. So you've already spent 3 to 5 months for the first decision, 4 to 6 months more for the second decision. So you're over a year now, and then it can take another year to get scheduled before a judge. So apply as early as possible because it is a long process, Geist said. A 2020 Government Accountability Office report found that about 1.3% of applicants filed for bankruptcy while waiting on their appeals, and 1.2% died before receiving a final decision. Many, particularly those without legal representation, end up wrongfully denied on multiple occasions before finally being approved with a lawyer's help, said Rebecca Vallis, Senior Fellow of the Century Foundation. Untold members spend what savings they have to try to stay afloat while waiting for an appeal to be heard, and countless more lose their homes in the process. There are about 8.2 million disabled workers collecting benefits, people like me, according to the Social Security Administration. Their average monthly benefit is $1,277. I get $1,000. So, long haul COVID-19 may present a vague set of symptoms, not unlike other conditions such as fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome that have also been approved for Social Security disability benefits. However, these type of conditions are more difficult to prove because they generally cannot be diagnosed with one medical test. Those aren't going to be awarded as quickly because you need to see those over a period of time, Geis said. You need a longitudinal history there, and those can be more difficult to document. So a longitudinal history is a history that covers linear time, so a period of years. The best way to establish a record of your symptoms is to share them with your doctor and to have them document what is going on. For example, if you have migraines, how long do they last? What does your recovery process look like? Keeping track of those details will help if your application has to be considered by a judge, Geist said. While the basic rule for Social Security disability is defined as a condition that has lasted. Maggie, I've got a wasp in here. Oh my goodness. It's on the wall. Oh my goodness. I'm terrified of wasps. This is my fear. And she's up near the ceiling, and I'm very scared. Oh, mercy. Okay. This is not a good thing during my live stream. Okay. If an individual is not, let's see, wait a minute. Well, the basic rule for Social Security disability is defined as a condition that has lasted or is expected to last for at least 12 months. That should not necessarily determine it's up there. Okay. Maggie to the rescue. Oh.
Hi. Can we get you out of here so you don't disturb my mother? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Just climb up the cup. Good. Wasp. Oh, no. Yes. I need you. Hi. What kind of wasp are you? It's not a red one.
It's not? Is it a black one?
It's brown.
That's a red one.
It's brown and black.
They can be brown.
Oh, they can?
Yeah, they can be brown. So, now show her to me. Oh.
The same kind that was in the house yesterday.
Oh, really?
That one was in the.
Wow.
How are they getting in?
I don't know. I I am so glad that
Anyway, can I
you
get
caught it.
outside now?
Yes, you can. Bye. I'm going to put that one on TikTok.
Bye,
Oh,
buddy. How are you
yeah.
getting in?
Scary to me. Ooh, I wish they wouldn't get in.
I wish they wouldn't either. The last one was in the.
I think they're getting in when we open the door because we don't have a screen door. We have a storm door. And I thought we got rid of the wasps when we got rid of my van because they loved my van. But
So we have a different color of wasp coming in the house.
well, it's still a red wasp.
I know, but it's a different nest.
Yeah. Well,
the other ones were red. The other ones were bigger.
huh.
The other ones were a little bit longer, bright red with black wings. This is a different one.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Huh.
It's stripedy. That's a guinea wasp.
Oh, cool.
It's not cool. They're very aggressive. They are one of the most aggressive wasps ever. So be careful when you release it that it doesn't come sting you because they
the
are.
last one I just took it out and I stomped on it because it almost stung Corrine.
Oh.
I got mad.
Oh. Yeah, don't attack our cats. We get even.
Yeah, it was climbing on Corrine.
Oh no.
Well, it had climbed off her onto the window.
Oh.
So I just grabbed it, took it outside, and just stomped it once.
Yeah, how dare you attack our cat? Yeah.
Like, how dare you almost sting Corrine?
Oh.
Don't do that.
But yeah, that's a guinea wasp. If they're stripedy, they're guinea wasps. Mama used to say they're born mad. No, just let it go. We need to not be enemies of the Hymenoptera because they're disappearing. Yeah, we have a wooded area around our complex of trailers where we live in a mobile home park. So I love being close to nature, but I don't like it when those get in the house. Oh, okay. So now I'm going to be jumpy all night. Okay, let's go back to the process of Social Security disability. Um, the basic rule for Social Security disability is defined as a condition that has lasted or is expected to last for at least 12 months. That should not necessarily determine when you apply for benefits. If an individual is not working and earning income, then they're allowed to apply now, Geist said. There's not a set period of time where they have to wait to apply. However, there are certain financial restrictions that claimants will have to meet to be approved. For starters, you must have paid so-called FICA taxes, FICA, into the system. Generally, you have to contribute for at least 10 years in order to be eligible. Additionally, your condition must meet Social Security's definition of disability. It must be so severe that you can no longer work. It must also be expected to last for at least a year or result in death. In addition, your income must fall below a certain threshold known as substantial gainful activity.
Don't see any others.
Good. Yeah, I think it's just a single.
Yeah, I looked all over the house and I didn't see any others. So
Good.
you're safe, Mom.
Did it threaten you or did it just fly off?
It just flew off.
Good.
It wasn't harming.
She's not scared of them. They smell the adrenaline and it's like, they have chemoreceptors on their antennae. And they can smell the fear if you've got adrenaline.
They always go for Mama. I'm always the one who's able to scoop them off and get them to go away.
Yeah. So,
Heck,
thank you.
Ma panicked when she got a bee in her hair.
Yeah.
The bees don't sting normally.
Well, they will if they get panicked enough.
As a last resort, because
But
once
they
they sting, they
die.
die.
Yeah, bees are different than wasps. And they're vegetarians, so they're not particularly aggressive.
The evil wasp.
Thank you. Oh, and by the way, if you see a wasp or a bee or an ant, 9 times out of 10 they will be female because the drones are very scarce. A drone mates with a queen and then they have babies. The queen has babies and they're all female. So um, occasionally a male will be born, but just enough to keep the species going. But all those workers, they're female. So the more you know, the less you have to be afraid of if you know their habits and stuff. Typically, wasps will fly towards the ceiling trying to get out. So they'll go to the windows, and sometimes we find dead ones in the windows, and we never knew that we had a wasp in the house. So, oh, be still, my beating heart. Okay. So, your income has to fall below a certain threshold known as substantial gainful activity. In 2021, that limit is 1,310 per month for non-blind individuals. Those who have not paid FICA taxes may instead qualify for supplemental security income, or SSI. However, those benefits are means tested and come with strict asset limits of $2,000 per individual or $3,000 per married couple. Some beneficiaries receive a combination of Social Security, disability, and SSI benefits due to the fact that they qualify for both. Weird. I didn't qualify for both. Mine was strictly disability. I think it converted when I turned 62. But while some disabled workers may be tempted to take advantage of expanded pandemic unemployment insurance benefits that are still available in some states, that could hurt your chances of getting approved for Social Security benefits, Geis said. When you apply for Social Security disability, you're saying you cannot do any kind of work. On the other hand, when you apply for unemployment insurance, you are certifying you are willing and able to work and looking for opportunities to do so. That can be viewed as a contradiction, Geis said. In March 2020, the Social Security Administration mostly shuttered its in-person services. Today, it is still largely processing correspondence online and via postal mail. A recent investigation by the Social Security Office of the Inspector General found there have been some big delays for people waiting on application decisions. Currently, it's taking about 125 days for the agency to process an initial claim, Geis said. For applications that are reconsidered, there's an additional 4 to 6 months, he said. So if you're planning to file an application for benefits for any disabling condition, including COVID-19 and associated long haul issues, the earlier the better, Geis said. And I feel for you if you are trying to get Social Security because it is so hard. I don't think it should be as hard. So here's guidance on long COVID as a disability under the ADA. So I will put that here. we'll do this. Boink. And are you giving Puppy some ice? Yeah, he's having fun. Okay, let's look at this one. Although many people with COVID-19 get better within weeks, some people continue to experience symptoms that can last months after first being infected and may have new or recurring symptoms at a later time. This can happen to anyone who has had COVID-19, even if the initial illness was mild. People with this condition are sometimes called long haulers. This condition is known as long COVID. In light of the rise of long COVID as a persistent and significant health issue, the Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Health and Human Services and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice have joined together to provide this guidance. This guidance explains that long COVID can be a disability under Titles II, State and Local Government, and III, Public Accommodations, of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Section 1557 of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Each of these federal laws protects people with disabilities from discrimination. This guidance also provides resources for additional information and best practices. This document focuses solely on long COVID and does not address when COVID-19 may meet the legal definition of disability. The civil rights protections and responsibilities of these federal laws apply even during emergencies. They cannot be waived. So, what is long COVID and what are its symptoms? According to the CDC, people with long COVID have a range of new or ongoing symptoms that can last weeks or months after they are infected with the virus that causes COVID-19 and that can worsen with physical or mental activity. Examples of common symptoms of long COVID include tiredness or fatigue, difficulty thinking or concentrating, sometimes called brain fog, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, headache, dizziness on standing, fast beating or pounding heart, known as heart palpitations, chest pain, cough, joint or muscle pain, depression or anxiety, fever, loss of taste or smell. This list is not exhaustive. Some people also experience damage to multiple organs including the heart, lungs, kidneys, skin, and brain. I have a breakout around my collarbone that keeps coming back, and I never had that before. That's a COVID thing. Can long COVID be a disability under the ADA, Section 504 and Section 1557? Yes, long COVID can be a disability under the ADA if it substantially limits one or more major life activities. These laws and their related rules define a person with a disability as an individual with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities of such individual. A person with a record of an impairment, or a person who is regarded as having such an impairment. A person with long COVID has a disability if the person's condition or any of its symptoms is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. This guidance addresses the actual disability part of the disability definition. The definition also covers individuals with a record of a substantially limiting impairment or those regarded as a person with long COVID has a disability if the person's condition or any of its symptoms is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So it goes on. So, long COVID is a physical or mental impairment. A physical impairment includes any physiological disorder or condition affecting one or more body symptoms, including, among others, the neurological, respiratory, cardiovascular, and circulatory systems. A mental impairment includes any mental or psychological disorder, such as an emotional or mental illness. Long COVID is a physiological condition affecting one or more body systems. Some people with long COVID experience lung damage, heart damage, including inflammation of the heart muscle, kidney damage, neurological damage, damage to the circulatory system resulting in poor blood flow, lingering emotional illness, and other mental health conditions. Accordingly, long COVID is a physical or mental impairment under the ADA, Section 504 and 1557. B. Long COVID can substantially limit one or more major life activities. Major life activities include a wide range of activities such as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, standing, sitting, reaching, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, concentrating, thinking, writing, communicating, interacting with others, and working. The term also includes the operation of a major bodily function, such as the functions of the immune system, the cardiovascular system, the neurological system, circulatory system, or the operation of an organ. The term substantially limits is construed broadly under these laws and should not demand extensive analysis. The impairment does not need to prevent or significantly restrict an individual from performing a major life activity, and the limitations do not need to be severe, permanent, or long-term. Whether an individual with long COVID is substantially limited in a major bodily function or other major life activity is determined without the benefit of any medication, treatment, or other measures used by the individual to lessen or compensate for symptoms. Even if the impairment comes and goes, it is considered a disability if it would substantially limit a major life activity while the impairment is active. Long COVID can substantially limit a major life activity. The situations in which an individual with long COVID might be substantially limited in a major life activity are diverse. Among possible examples, some include A person with long COVID who has lung damage that causes shortness of breath, fatigue, and related effects is substantially limited in respiratory function, among other major life activities. A person with long COVID who has symptoms of intestinal pain, vomiting, and nausea that have lingered for months is substantially limited in gastrointestinal function, among other major life activities. A person with long COVID who experiences memory lapses and brain fog is substantially limited in brain function, concentrating, and/or thinking. Is long COVID always a disability? No. An individualized assessment is necessary to determine whether a person's long COVID condition or any of its symptoms substantially limits a major life activity. The CDC and health experts are working to better understand long COVID. 4. What rights do people whose long COVID qualifies as a disability have under the ADA, Section 504 and Section 1557? People whose long COVID qualifies as a disability are entitled to the same protections from discrimination as any other person with a disability under the ADA Section 504 and Section 1557. Put simply, they are entitled to full and equal opportunities to participate in and enjoy all aspects of civic and commercial life. For example, this may mean that businesses or state or local governments will sometimes need to make changes in the way they operate to accommodate a person's long COVID-related limitations. For people whose long COVID qualifies as a disability, these changes or reasonable modifications may include providing additional time on a test for a student who has difficulty concentrating, modifying procedures so a customer who finds it is too tiring to stand in the line can announce their presence and sit down without losing their place in line, providing refueling assistance at a gas station for a customer whose joint or muscle pain prevents them from pumping their own gas, modifying a policy to allow a person who experiences dizziness when standing to be accompanied by their service animal that is trained to stabilize them. What federal resources are there for people with symptoms of long COVID? The Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Health and Human Services has the following page on civil rights and COVID-19. And if you believe that an entity covered by HHS civil rights laws has violated your rights, there's where you file the complaint. There's a link there. And the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice has a page on its ada.gov website that discusses topics related to COVID-19 and the ADA. And there's a lot of other links, footnotes, and this page was helpful. I can't think of anything to improve it. So that's a lot. So it's very important to remember that COVID is not a simple virus that may or may not make you feel bad. It attacks your major organs in your body, and it's not just a respiratory illness. It affects a lot of systems, and it is much better to protect yourself against this than to deal with it once it comes, and it may make a lot of us disabled who had it. So, and it's been our experience that, the second time you have it, it's worse. So, it worries me that so many people don't want to take the vaccine when just taking the vaccine would help you. So I wish that more people were willing to take the vaccine, and I'm glad to see that some companies are mandating it because we shouldn't have the right to infect 30,000 people when just wearing a simple face mask can prevent that. And masks are proven to be effective. There are a lot of people pumping out misinformation, but if you look at studies they've done with masks, they've found that worn properly, covering the nose and mouth, that they are 80% effective at not passing disease. This is what we want. And the more kids that you've got that may or may not be positive for COVID running around the schools without masks, you're going to have more cases of COVID. So I really wish that there were mask mandates because wearing a mask doesn't hurt anybody. There are a few people who cannot wear them because maybe they have really, really severe asthma. Mine is mild, so I can't speak for all people with asthma. There may be some with COPD that cannot stand wearing a mask, but I have a friend with COPD and he does mask up when he goes in places. So apparently he's not so much affected that he can't wear a mask. I would imagine it's very few people that are so short of breath that they could not tolerate a mask for a short time. But I am definitely not going to say that a person who can't wear a mask is a criminal. But I'm saying that if you can't wear a mask, maybe you should stay out of crowded situations like stores. There are many delivery options. You can go through drive-throughs and pick up things. So there are many ways to get what you need for your household without exposing others to something that you may or not be carrying. And that's what makes COVID-19 so dangerous, is because one person won't have any symptoms and will not know that he or she has it. And if he or she is not wearing a mask, that one person can spread it to 30,000 people because one person shares the virus with one person, they take it home to their families go out and they're spreading it, and before you know it, it's 30,000 people. That's just a lot to take in, and some of them will die. You know, and they're seeing children in the hospitals in Mississippi and other states, Texas, Florida. They're seeing children dying of COVID. And there again, the risk is small, but even one child's death is too many when a simple mask would prevent it. Do you want to spread it to 30,000 of your neighbors and friends and their relatives, and maybe a child dies of COVID because you would not wear a mask? I think public health should have precedence over our rights when it involves something as devastating as this virus. I'm not gonna get on my soapbox. I'm gonna find more references. Let's see. So, sorry, I already answered your survey. Ah, so So here's what the Social Security Administration says about it. Let's take a look. Right on their homepage. Let's see. So this is just general questions. All right, let's look under other coronavirus and Social Security Administration resources. Oh, I'll put this in there so if y'all want, you can follow along. And I'll take a look to see if there's any comments, and I don't see any. So if y'all want to comment, you can. If you just want to hang out and listen, that's fine with me too. So let's go take a look at this. Okay, here's where you can get program policy information. And here's COVID-19 resources, CDC website, and the USA Gov website. So that's just a general, let's see, hearings and appeals. Yeah, so you've got ways to appeal, but and you're not required to have your hearing by telephone or online, but that seems like it would be a better way to do it. I had to go down to the courthouse, and it was just, all the waiting was nerve-wracking. I would have loved to have had my hearing over Zoom or something. So, and even a telephone hearing wouldn't be a bad thing. And they are able to conduct hearings by telephone and online video. For a lot of disabled people, it is a real hardship to have to get out of the house and go down to where the hearing is. At my hearing, they actually had someone a person over online, and we had video. So, in addition to all the people sitting around the long table that was in my hearing room, they also had someone testifying by computer, an expert witness. So they were asking them questions, and I was able to see and hear everything. I really would not have minded watching all of this and participating from the comfort of my home. So I have found that the online, seeing my doctor online, if I didn't require a physical exam, I still had to go in to have blood drawn. But it was nice to be able to do appointments online. Um, I think that for doctor's appointments, it's probably better to be seen in person, but certainly um, for I did a 6-week cognitive behavior therapy workshop that was once a week for 6 weeks, and those actually it was twice a week for 6 weeks. I had my regular therapist, and I had a person who was doing the well, they partnered, and I was really it was a very good course, and I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed having 2 different therapists to talk to. So, I think that mental health care, definitely the quality is very good online, and a therapist can do that from the comfort of their own home. They don't have to have an office. I think that's great. They certainly can do just as good of a job over the internet as they would in person. So, I definitely like telehealth, and I hope that it continues to grow. So, this is just questions. So, let's look at coronavirus. Okay. And there's all sorts of help on here. The Social Security website is really good. So, okay. Anyway, let's go back. And American Civil Liberties Union. Let's see what they say. Absolutely, our rights are under attack. I agree with them. Let me do this and get this link over here so y'all can see what I'm looking at. And I'll get the title, because it's quicker than me typing it. And I'll put it in here. Okay. And I'll put it in the chat. Alrighty. Okay. As we all do our best to protect the health and well-being of our families, friends, and ourselves in this unsettling time, we want to ensure that information about COVID-19 is fully accessible to everyone in the community. So below there are links to information in plain language, Spanish, and ASL. Cool. So, all sorts of resources. Free assistive technology during COVID-19. This is cool. We'll go take a look at that. And I got the coronavirus stimulus payment. And that came to me the same way that my monthly check comes, as a direct deposit. So, okay, let's take a look at some of these. Let's look at this free assistive technology. Freedom Scientific. This is cool. So if you have an email address at your work or college, you can check to see if you qualify for free JAWS, Zoom Text, or Fusion. That's cool. And providing services to children with disabilities during COVID-19. States' responsibilities to infants, toddlers, and children with disabilities and their families, and the staff serving these children. Local educational agencies and early intervention service programs will need to collaborate with their state educational agency, Bureau of Indian Education, or local public health department as appropriate to address questions about how, what, and when services should be provided to children with disabilities. So, okay, so apparently the if the school is providing services, then the outreach for kids with disabilities should continue. So let's see. Okay, this is for very specific situations. So, I'm gonna go back and here's what the Biden administration says, that long COVID can qualify people as disabled, and they should be able to get accommodations. Okay, I'll put this article in there too. Didn't have as much as I thought it would, but I'll include it just to show that the White House is thinking about people with long COVID. So this is cool that these resources are available. So I will add this to the chat. Alrighty. So and the Disability Rights Fund is monitoring global disability rights amid the pandemic. So let's see. It's really important that somebody is monitoring the situation here to so that agencies can take action and make sure that disabled people get what they need during the pandemic. So they are an advocate for the disabled. All right, so let me see. And U.S. Department of Labor has a resource page for those who might have long COVID. And you should be able to ask for job compensations under the law. So if you're able to keep working, then you should be able to ask for accommodations in your workplace. And I hope that y'all can get your accommodations. Sometimes it's hard. I was very glad when the government said that people with COVID-19 should have leave with pay. Maggie was working at Walmart at the time, and it really helped us, keep food on the table and stuff when she was. Even though I do get food stamps, I wasn't getting as many as we needed. And the just being able to get those stimulus checks really, really helped us a lot. Oh, excuse me. Oh, that's coronavirus resources. I'll get that over here. Okay. The from the Department of Labor. And let's hear some of the voices of people with disabilities during the outbreak. Because people's stories are important. It's important to tell your COVID stories so that they can be available for people to share who may be trying to convince a relative that COVID-19 is real. There are still some people that just refuse to believe how bad it is. What is really bad is when the hospitals get full, then nobody can get health care. And that's one of the real dangers of this virus. When you've got doctors and nursing staff quitting hospitals that are so flooded because they just can't stand seeing all the death. It is really hard on a nurse to lose a patient. And Dr. Mike will tell you on YouTube that definitely nurses are the backbone of everything a doctor does because they are the ones who actually put in the NG tubes. They are the ones to start IVs. They are, they're the ones providing patient care. And when a patient has COVID and they go on a ventilator and they're in the hospital for so long, a nurse has so much she has to do that a lot of them are just burning out. And when you consider that the average nurse in her lifetime only sees a few deaths, mostly they see their work contributing to the patient leaving the hospital, of being able to do normal things. And it's such an abnormal time when our hospitals are so full that even people with heart attacks and cancer patients who have a crisis are turned away because there are no ICU beds. It's really sad. So let's hear some stories from people. Let's see what stories we have. Let's see what they're saying about vaccination in Nepal. The National Federation of the Disabled in Nepal, this is in India, is an umbrella organization that advocates for the rights, interests, and entitlements of people with disabilities across the country. With more than 300 member organizations in 74 districts, NFDN is the leading disability rights movement in Nepal and the center of countless views of a variety of people with different abilities, opinions, and hopes. And Rashmi is the mother of a young girl with a physical disability living in Kathmandu. The following interview reflects some of the many responses that Light for the World received to its call for input on the current situation around COVID-19 in Nepal. So, the question was, how would you describe the current situation related to the COVID-19 vaccination in Nepal? Are you aware of any plans to ensure the prioritization of people with disabilities? So, Bawan is the one he's interviewing. He says Nepal started to provide vaccines to its citizens on Wednesday, 27 January 2021, with health workers as the first target group. By the end of February, about 9,000 people have been vaccinated in 93 immunization centers in 64 districts. The government has announced to continue with elderly citizens and teachers in a second round. And Rashmi says, I've seen journalists, bankers, and some other people with power queuing in front of immunization centers to get their vaccinations early. And he's worried that people with disabilities will be overseen for many more months. And he had gotten his, and he was quite surprised to see that both the information during the registration process and the venue itself were accessible to people with a physical disability like him. I felt informed and I'm falling asleep. I am going to end the live stream early because I'm just really tired. I went to get my allergy shots today and it just drained me. So I'm going to have to stop here. But here are stories about people with disabilities, and I encourage you to go through this website and see more, because there's a lot going on in the world about vaccination. And I hope that y'all will be going to get yours if you haven't already gotten it. Oh, I haven't been screen sharing. Hello. How you doing, Miss? Sometimes. I'm sorry I didn't see you earlier. As I was saying, I'm really sleepy. I went to get my vaccination, no, my allergy shots today. And I'm just about to fall asleep here, sitting here, so I think I'm going to have to go. But I'm glad that you came in before I did. I'm glad to see you. How did things go at school today? I'd like to know. Did it go better for you? I'm going to drink water. Maybe I can rouse myself a little bit. So, I missed sometimes. Are you there? I'll wait a couple more minutes and see if he's still there. Maybe he stepped out for a minute. I'll go ahead and for my disability moment, I realize that there are a lot of people out there who still are not getting their vaccination, and there's so much misinformation on a lot of social media sites that a lot of people are like, well, I don't know what to believe. And to y'all, I say that maybe you need to be careful that your search results are not returning more of things that you'd like to see instead of what's actually true. And how do you tell? Good sources. You know, if you don't trust the government, then you're probably not going to trust what the CDC says. But the CDC is really a good source, and your country's Ministry of Health is a good source. You have to trust your government to a certain extent to believe what the health agencies are telling you. But if you compare different countries and the recommendations coming out of them, and you compare that with the WHO, there are some minor differences, but basically what they are saying, what they're all saying, is that the vaccine is safe, they are effective, and if we do not vaccinate more people, we are going to end up with a variant, because the more a virus is bounced back and forth between people, the more it mutates. And some mutations can make a virus less harmful, and some can make it much, much more harmful. And we are seeing with these new variants coming out that Delta just took over my country in 4 weeks. Now it is the most prevalent strain out there, and it is everywhere worldwide. It's like a wildfire. So with Delta, COVID got a lot more transmissible. So if you've got one person with COVID, instead of affecting 2.5 people per person, you are affecting 7 people per person. And that may not seem like a whole terrible lot of people, but if you consider that it is a logarithmic function, that if somebody is sick and they talk or sing or shout, they are spraying virus. And individuals might have COVID without knowing it. And this is the danger, because when you're in a crowd, there's this little cloud of infection around you. If you put a mask on your face, you're still going to breathe. And so you're still going to release some virus, but it's cut by 80%. Most of it sticks to the inside of your mask. So it protects you from other people, and it protects them from you. And the fact that you can have this virus without it being deadly to you, but if you're not wearing a mask, you are potentially infecting 30,000 people. And some of those 30,000 will die from COVID. And you can't predict, well, you infect 5 people, It's uncertain how many of those people might have an underlying health condition that might make them have a worse case of COVID. Some of these people are going to get long haul COVID and be disabled the rest of their lives. And some people are going to get COVID and end up in the hospital on a respirator and they will die. And because there are so many people with COVID in Mississippi, pretty much every hospital in the state is having to send emergency patients to other states. And those states are getting overwhelmed. So in my state, Georgia is one of the states that's hardest hit. It's not as hard hit as Florida and Mississippi are, and Alabama, Florida and Alabama, but it is definitely seeing increases in hospitalizations. And I live near Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I'm worried that if I have an accident in the car on the way to the doctor and need to go to the emergency room, I might not get seen. It is serious that so many COVID patients are filling up the beds that there is no room for other people. What about a woman having a baby? If she can't have a baby in the hospital, then, having a plan having a planned birth at home, you've got it all figured out in case things go wrong and you need to go to the hospital. But if all the ambulances that go to your hospital are full in the parking lot with people sitting in them that need ICU beds and can't get them, guess what? Your ambulance is not coming. So you might have to have your baby at home in an unplanned birth. This would be terrible because what if things go wrong? And if you haven't prepared for a home birth, you don't know the things that someone who has carefully planned for a home birth knows. So it makes it more risky for your baby. And that's just one situation. I mean, what if your kid falls and hits his head and he needs to go to the hospital and the hospital has no beds? Because if the ICU is full, the regular hospital beds are full. And they are probably making beds in places that were never meant for people to be. I went to the hospital during a COVID surge. It was horrible. I was there for 5 hours in the emergency room. I did get a bed in the emergency room, but there were 6 gurneys outside in the hall, outside of those emergency rooms. So I saw conditions where they had to put patients just everywhere. I mean, the halls were filled with people. When they took me to my room, I saw them. So you had people who didn't even have hospital rooms, that they were out in the hall because there were no beds. And having seen that, I can just imagine what our poor doctors are going through, what our nurses are going through, what our care aides are going through. All the staff in the hospital is feeling it, and people are quitting because they just can't take so much death. They're human after all. The emotional consequences of losing so many patients and knowing that it could have been prevented with the vaccines that we have. It just makes it feel like an exercise in futility, and more doctors and nurses are burning out. They are quitting the profession. And it is very sad to see because it takes a long time to train a doctor. It takes somewhat less time to train a nurse, but there aren't enough nursing students to take up the slack. And more people are deciding not to go into the profession because they're seeing all this burnout among health personnel, and they really don't want to get into that. And I can't blame them. So we need, anybody who's hearing this, if you don't want to get the vaccine, then maybe you need more information, and maybe you need to seek that information. Talk to your doctor, or if you've got a friend who's a nurse, ask them what they think. And talk to more than one person, because if one person might be against vaccinations and feeling the way that you do about not wearing a mask, maybe someone else who is wearing a mask who has gotten vaccinated, if they're still healthy and walking around, then maybe it's not so bad to get that vaccine. It's important to keep an open mind because, I do not see any sign that a microchip has been put in me. I mean, it's ridiculous to think. I mean, the vaccine is clear. A microchip would be visible. There was no such thing when I got my shot, and I did not see anyone getting a chip as part of their vaccination. I watched my pets being given a microchip, and the needle was much bigger than the needle they used on me. A microchip would not have fit through that needle. So I don't know where people are getting these crazy ideas from, but microchips are pretty big. You have to have a huge needle for that. So, you know, ask a vet to show you a microchip. You might not be as nervous about taking the vaccine because a vet could tell you, well, here's the size needle I have to use when I put in a microchip, and here is the size needle that they will probably be using on you to give you the vaccine. It's not the same. I had a little bitty needle when I had my vaccines. So, and I've seen enough needles in my life to know the difference between, you know, the larger bore ones and the smaller bore ones. And there's plenty of doctors and anesthetists and people on the internet who talk about the different size needles, and, um, you can see for yourself the difference in the sizes. You can spot that. So you don't need to be worried about being shot with a microchip. Nobody is going to do that to you. And even if they did, the microchip that went in my pets does not give a signal at all. It is simply a chip that is engraved with a 6-digit number. And that number is useless without the database that I had to go into online to enter my pet's information. So even if you had a microchip in you, um, it's a 6-digit number. If it's not attached to a database, it is useless. It is not a broadcasting type of thing. So, if you know a little bit about microchips and how they work, then it's less mystifying. A microchip doesn't store any information. It just has that 6-digit number that ties you to an entry in a database somewhere. And if that entry in the database is not there, then the chip itself is useless. So it's important to know a little stuff so that you don't get scared of something that can save your life. So I am hoping that all that help. Hello, Corrine. Come here, honey. Come here so people can see you. Look, look. Yeah, there's my Corrine. Aw, hello. Hello. So, for me and Corrine here, who has a microchip, and I can't even feel it. It's in her shoulder blade somewhere. It's not inside the bone. It's injected under the skin. So, if I felt around enough, I could probably feel it. But, you know, she's got a microchip, but except for me putting the information about her to attach it to that 6-digit number that her microchip, you know, there's no way I can scan. I mean, when they scan for the microchip, they can detect it and the 6-digit number pops up, but it doesn't broadcast. So there's no way that without a scanner that I could get any information from it at all. And I would know, if she was being scanned, because barcode readers are pretty big, right? So people have so many fears, and they're saying, well, it hasn't been tested. Well, how many million people? There's like 3 million people that have gotten the vaccine, and if they were going to grow a second head or have tumors or lose babies, then we would be hearing about that on the news. There would be an outcry, right? So I'm hoping that people will realize, as more and more people get the vaccine, that nobody has reported any long-term side effects. Now, there is a lady in my church group who says that a friend of hers got disabled after having the vaccine, but maybe he got COVID before the vaccine because it takes several weeks to take effect to prevent you from getting sick. So it's quite possible he got infected with COVID, and maybe the COVID caused his disability. So it is easy to assume things when we aren't doctors and we don't have that 8 years of knowledge or more that they have, and the experiences they have, which are even more important than the book learning, to be able to apply that knowledge. So I'm not a doctor. I just read a lot of news stories, but I it makes me sad that my area of the country is in such a crisis right now because so many people have been misled about the vaccine. What we need to be doing, if we are pro vaccine and we are trying to help our neighbors who maybe have heard some misinformation, we need to listen to their concerns, because arguing or being rude or anything like that, that does not get the message across. But if you can find out why they are against the vaccine and talk about what you know and maybe share your experience with getting the vaccine and say, well, that didn't happen to me, then maybe they might think differently about getting it. But all in all, if a person is really convinced that the vaccine is going to do something terrible to their genetics, then you really can't say anything to dissuade them. But it's more important to love them anyway. You can agree to disagree, and maybe some people who are on the fence about the vaccine, your knowledge might help them to make a good decision about it. but we don't get anywhere with hate and with arguments and with putting them down because of what they believe. All we can do is listen to them and try to meet their concerns with something factual that we have read. But all in all, it's not our job to create a total rift or split with that person because of their false beliefs. We just need to love everybody. You know, those of us who are Christians, we believe that Jesus loved everybody, even those who gave information that got him crucified. I mean, he still loved them and he still wanted to be their savior. So, you know, we need to follow his example and just love people. People who hear misinformation and decide that they are not getting the vaccine, they are not evil. They're not meaning to spread COVID-19 to 30,000 people. They aren't believing what the mainstream news is saying, and they're being fed a bunch of lies by people who maybe have shares in the Regeneron treatment. It's really sad that our country is so divided about COVID. But I am hoping that eventually something will be done about the misinformation campaigns to stop them. Yes, we need free speech. We do not need to have free speech without a little voice of warning on statements that are not true. And we need to have good sources that prove that this statement is wrong. I think the approach that Twitter is taking is wonderful. I'm in their Birdwatch thing, and when I see a tweet that is tweeting misinformation, I will annotate that tweet with a good source and the reasons why I think it's false information. Now, if they had programs like that on all social media, then it might make it easier for people to get the valid information. You know, we need to start labeling things as this isn't exactly true. You know, we need to do some fact checking of things that we see on the internet instead of just standing idly by and letting people misinform people. The solution starts with us at the grassroots. So, you know, you may say, well, I'm not on social media that much. You don't have to be. I spend maybe 15 minutes on social media. I do not go on there and stay hours and hours because it's just not mentally healthy to do that. But what I do is I'll go on and if I see misinformation being put out on my feed, then I'll go on there and I will say, well, here's what I think, and I don't think this is true. And I try to find a source to back up what I'm saying. And if enough of us did that, then there would be that information attached that somebody else can look at and say, well, this person isn't giving any sources. They're just spouting this stuff. But this lady has a source that proves she's right. Who am I going to believe? You know, it is much better to have a link to an article that supports what you believe. It gives a little more weight to what you say. So if more of us did that, maybe we could fight this flood of misinformation because it's really hurting so many people. And, you know, when every family is hit with COVID, I think a lot of people will be converts to the vaccine because it's a horrible way to die. And it just kills me that children are ending up in ICU beds, and yet parents don't want their kids to wear masks. You know, one child in an ICU is too much, in my opinion, having lost 4 babies. They're too precious to lose. Nobody should be losing their kids. They should be protected against the vaccine until protected against COVID-19. They should have the vaccination. And 12 and up can get it, and they are doing trials now with younger children. And I'm hoping that soon the vaccine will be made available to all ages so that they can be protected. If you do genealogy and you go in cemeteries, you will notice a marked difference between grave sites, family grave sites, in the 50s and 60s than you see in the 40s, in the 30s, in the teens and 20s. You see so many child graves. It is sobering when you look at a family group and 6 of those little graves are there with a couple. It really wakes you up to the reality that the world without the vaccines was a very cruel one. I cannot imagine what it would do to a mother to have 6 children and have half of them die before they were 12. That's what happened in my grandparents' family. That's what happened in a lot of families in the 20s and 30s. And then we got vaccines. We got penicillin is what we got. And we started seeing less death from disease. 40s. In the 50s and 60s, we started getting vaccines. And the more people who were vaccinated, especially the polio vaccination, because in the 50s, my sister was a kid of the 50s. She was seeing a lot of her friends end up in iron lungs. It was very scary. And some people recovered from it, but some people had to be in iron lungs for the rest of their lives because their lungs couldn't work. If you remember things like that, then you are a lot more likely to be a person who likes vaccines because the world without vaccines was devastating to mothers to lose all those babies from illness that is now preventable. And we are seeing outbreaks at college campuses where college kids are ending up in comas from common childhood diseases that a simple shot would have protected them. They're getting disabled from the high fevers. It does brain damage. So I am hoping that more people will realize what a boon vaccines are and want them for their children, for their grandchildren, for the future. It's so important that we are protected against these childhood diseases that can wipe out most of a small town in a very short time, as they used to back when my grandparents were young. So I hope I've given y'all some food for thought, but I hope that I haven't started any arguments between family members either, because here at Granny's house, we're just all about love. I just want people to love each other and take care of each other. And I give all y'all my big hug and welcome back to my house tomorrow. And I'm on every day except Sunday, 8 to 10. So until we see you again, this is Granny Handicap saying goodbye. And I hope y'all will have a good night. And I hope the sources I've given you do some good. Have a good night now. Good night.